everyone. I'm Shamvi from Designhill and your host for today. I hope you and your families are keeping well and safe, taking all the precautions and taking care of your near and dear ones. Welcome again to yet another event by Designhill. And today we will be discussing about how to build powerful brands through personal branding. This event is brought to you by Designhill, world's leading creative marketplace that caters to the creative needs of businesses and individuals alike who can source high quality designs from professional designers and buy unique products from thousands of artworks which we have already created by independent artists. So, moving ahead, let me introduce you to our amazing set of panelists for today. We have with us Matt. Matt helps business leaders align powerful brand strategies. He is an entrepreneur based out in UK and carries out 18 years of experience working with startups to huge brand names like Nestle, Capital One, Nikon, etc. Matt was recently listed as a top 50 UK advisor. Hi, Matt. Please welcome on board.
Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be here and excited for this conversation.
Yes, I am also pretty excited. Next up on the panel, we have Peter. Peter is a professional speaker, a brand building specialist, and an author based in Canada. He helps individuals and organizations to think and act more creative, to manage change, address business challenges, and build stronger brands. Welcome, Peter.
Welcome. Great pleasure to be here, Shampavi. Thank you. And I understand you may have difficulty seeing me. That may be a blessing in disguise for everyone.
Welcome on board, Peter. Very happy to have you here. And next up on the panel, we have Sunny. Sunny is an award-winning CEO and a co-founder of Moto, one of the top leading leadership and branding consultancies in the country. She's an author of a groundbreaking business career book named Rare Breed, a guide to success for a defined, dangerous, and different. Named one of the GD USA's top 25 people to watch, she has an unconventional approach to building standout brands and empowering young entrepreneurs who dare to be different in the sea of sameness. Welcome, Sunny, on board.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me.
Very happy to have you on the panel here, Sunny. Thank you so much, guys, for taking out time from your busy schedule and joining us today for this discussion. It is an honor to have you all here with us. And a big thank you to Designhill Events team for putting up such an amazing set of panelists. Grace, so before we begin this session, here's a big announcement for all the attendees here. We are giving away certificates to all the attendees who will stick around till the end of the discussion. You just can't miss that chance, you know. Also, you can take a screenshot of this event and post it on your Twitter accounts. Use hashtag Designhill Events, tag Designhill DH, and all our speakers whose Twitter handles will be in the chat section on your right. One lucky winner will have a chance to win a print shop gift card worth $50. All right, so before we start the session, let's quickly look at what Designhill is all about.
Looking to get your boss to remember your name? Head to the world's #1 creative marketplace, Designhill.
When my company promoted me to head up our latest real estate development project, I was excited, then anxious, then petrified. How was I going to hire the team, get the designs completed, and design beautiful presentation materials on our lean budget while impressing my bosses, some of whom are still learning my name?
Good job, Mitch.
My name's Lawrence. That's why I went to Designhill and got the design help I needed that fit within my company's brand guidelines. The process was simple. Designhill's design contest ensured I'd get a ton of results I'd love. Start by picking a number of designs that inspire you. This one's good, and that one. This one speaks to me. Then share some information about the project. Lastly, pick a package that fits your budget. Do you just want a logo, or do you want it all? Then, boom. I got more than 60 custom design options to choose from, as well as all the other graphic design assets I wanted. And it's all backed by Designhill's 100% money-back guarantee. If I don't find a design I like, I get my money back. You can't lose. Now I have what I need to make a splash at my meetings, with everything from business cards, pamphlets, posters, and more. It's real.
Let the world know it's real and build your brand with Designhill.
All right, we're back again, and we are all set to start the session here. We will also be, guys, we will also be taking up questions during the session. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the questions tab on your screen. So let's get started. My first question, and the most basic one to our panelists today here, is what is exactly brand identity and why a brand needs it? Let me start with Matt.
Okay, well, I think it's good to start with a bit of definition, because I always think that brand has a bit of an identity crisis, right? Because when you say brand to a lot of people, they'll think of a logo and some fonts, and I think we've gone way beyond that from a thinking perspective. So my definition of a brand is the meaning that a people attach to you and your offering, right? So what that definition does is it means that in effect you don't own it. It's in the hearts and minds of the people that perceive you, that are looking at you. So the brand, is what they think about you. I think Jeff Bezos, the ex-CEO of Amazon, once described it as, what people say about you when you're not in the room. And that principle goes for whether it's a business, a product, a service, or I know you want to talk in a little while about personal brands. So whether it's you yourself in your career, in your job as a leader, in an organization. And therefore, what we need to do, and that's what really the game I'm in and the other panelists are in, is to manage that meaning. And that's what branding is all about. Now, your question, just to sort of sum it up, you said, what's the difference between that and brand identity? Well, I think your identity then is all of the touch points, all of the things that people will kind of bring into their minds to think about you. It's all the signals that you put out. And so brand identity for me isn't just logos, fonts, colors, that kind of stuff. It's the whole experience that somebody has. If you're a business, in what you're selling and how you're doing business, and the experiences you create. And if you're an individual, it's about how you speak, how you dress, all the things that you do that creates meaning into somebody's mind. That's your identity and that's your brand.
Absolutely perfect. On point there, Matt. Sunny, would you like to add down to the points of Matt?
Yeah, I think Matt touched on that really well. I mean, I would say that brand is what you feel and brand identity is what you see. So brand identity at large, if we think about it in relationship to branding, as Matt was sort of saying, I think brand is sort of the collective experience of all those aspects. But I think brand identity goes just one level down, which is it's all the things that you can see, hear, touch, hear and hold essentially. And it's that whole visual and verbal system and vibe and expression of your brand. So, logo, color, type, etc. But even if you've ever been to, an Abercrombie and Fitch store, that scent that you're engulfed with when you walk in, that is also, that retail experience is also brand identity too. And I think it's usually rooted in a larger brand system. It's used to support a brand strategy. And that brand identity really gives you important clues to who you are and the type of brand that you are. So in a nutshell, I think brand identity is the deliberate effort that you make to say, this is who I am to the world.
Absolutely right. I think it's actually a collective customer experience a customer faces when he enters a brand, either retail or digital or any which way. Peter,
Right.
please, really want to hear your points on this.
Yeah, again, well, building on what Sunny and Matt said, when it comes down to definitions of brands, yes, I use territory in the mind. But when I talk about brand identity, I understand it more in terms of visual identity. And by that, I mean, it's kind of the language of your brand, and it typically has represented visually. Sometimes it can be interpreted as personality, brand personality, another way of kind of making your brand distinctive and standing apart. But typically I understand it as brand language. And for that, I see your brand identity as a statement piece. It's a bit like if your personal brand was you, how you dress yourself. Everyone is trying to stand out and be distinctive. Not everyone, but those amongst us who are brand people do want to be distinctive. And it doesn't mean you necessarily have to dress elaborately like a peacock. You may just choose a statement piece like red shoes or red socks, or David Ogilvy when I used to work with red was the color, and he used to wear red braces, and people would emulate that by wearing some article of clothing that was red, for example.
Right.
You know, I passed a shop just down here in on London Street the other day, and it was selling unique odd pieces of furniture. It was called the Odd Chair Company, and I love it. And its proposition was every room should say something about yourself. So instead of everyone going in and having an IKEA living room, they would have a unique statement piece. And that was a great kind of definition for me of kind of brand identity. And of course, it helps establish consistency and familiarity and recognition and distinctiveness. And it's more than just having a livery, a set of colors or things like that. But that's part of what brand identity is. It's part of the packaging of the brand that reinforces your overall brand positioning, that territory in your mind. So still a little bit more tied to description for me about what brand identity means.
Absolutely right there, on point there. So I think the key takeaway here is that a brand identity is basically a mixture of overall, everything visual, the experience, the like Sunny gave a small example there. When you enter a store, the smell of the store and the entire aura of the store, it all builds up to create an identity. Absolutely right there. So that brings me to my next question. There is a lot of confusion around people don't really know the purpose, the exact purpose of building a brand. So why is the purpose so critical for building a brand, and how can one actually articulate a purpose that will inspire the audience to trust and support a particular brand? Let me start with Sunny.
So purpose, I think, is just it's a bit of an enigma in the business world. But at Motto, purpose is at the center of everything we do. And when we started in 2005, we really understood very early on that purpose was a huge motivator and a very important asset when thinking about business and the direction of your company. Every brand needs to know why it's marching towards a certain hill, and also the team needs to understand that. The organization, the customer, and also people that work within the company need to understand that. So I think it's important that purpose acts as that compass, right? It's that internal directive. It guides you in ways that are congruent with your purpose, your vision, your values, your belief systems. And when you are able to articulate that purpose, it helps your audience also begin to support the brand, whether subconsciously or consciously. And so when we're thinking about helping organizations define that purpose or discover that purpose, one of the biggest questions that we really challenge people to think about is like, what are you actually fighting for? And follow that by why should anyone care? And that sounds like a really, really easy, simple question, but it's one of the most difficult things that the organizations that we work with, specifically small businesses and otherwise, actually struggle with, because it's quite hard to synthesize why you're going into this world every day for fighting for your business. And to be able to kind of synthesize that into a couple of short words or a phrase that people can rally behind, it takes quite a bit of thinking to do that. And so what you're looking for is this sort of short declarative statement of why you do what you do. It doesn't always have to be necessarily tied to saving the world or have some kind of extraordinary impact. Maybe it's just that you make other people happy, but you need clarity on that purpose because you need to anchor the brand around it. And my best advice is that it first must inspire you before it can inspire anyone else.
Absolutely right there. Matt, please.
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of what Sunny's saying there. I think purpose, right, gets a little bit of rap in marketing circles, because when you do the surveys, customers never say they buy from a brand because of the brand's purpose or high level purpose, right? So you've got like Brian Sharp and Mark Ritson, and they rip into this concept of purpose. But what I think Sharp and Ritson are kind of forgetting is that purpose, as very much to what Sunny said, is an internal rally cry, right? That's where it starts. It's a North Star to hold the leadership team accountable for where they want to go and why they're in business. And then cascading that down it should all of the initiatives of a business should ladder into this purpose. And if it doesn't, then frankly, you're going to have chaos. And that purpose needs to be brand. It also needs to be able to be used externally so that if customers happen to come into contact with it, they also should be inspired and motivated by it. But they might not buy a product specifically because of that, but the product's the outcome, the innovation, the creation of the brand who has a purpose. So purpose is insanely important if you're trying to rally people around something, to go forward with. If you're trying to align people, which is basically what brand strategy should do. And so so that's why purpose is important to brand. You asked as well in your question, what is the purpose of kind of defining a brand, I think was the sense of it. And just to kind of touch on that, I think that the purpose of that is that question of aligning, you want to do business or attract people that believe what you believe, that are trying to get to where you want to get to. You don't really want people, on the bus who don't believe in you and believe where you're going. You want them off. So as a way of defining that, you've got to clarify your purpose, clarify why you exist, beyond making money, why anyone should care, and manage the meaning accordingly. And if you do that, you'll find that the uphill struggle is less uphill because it's clear where you're going. You can make decisions better, and really that's the purpose behind purpose.
Absolutely right there, Peter. You want to add down something to Matt's points and Sunny's points?
Well, both Sunny and Matt have kind of covered it pretty well. I mean, I would just underline the point that you need purpose as an anchor. Without it, all paths take you everywhere into chaos. And it's amazing how few organizations and brands I know actually make the real effort to articulate their purpose in a really meaningful, distinctive way. And even though everyone's read it, Simon Sinek's Begin With Why and all of the rest of it, they don't actually do it very well. And I don't feel generally. And I think that because they overcomplicate it. To me, it's relatively simple. Purpose is all about your raison d'etre, why you exist to serve.
Right.
And start with identifying who it is that you're going to serve or you wish to serve and narrow focusing that. Then articulate something that's very meaningful, that stands you apart. And it means, like, as Matt was saying, it helps you find the right type of target audience, the people who are going to be interested in your brand, what you have to offer. But it's amazing how many people don't do that. I mean, I'm consulting to a group of orthopedic surgeons here in Canada, maybe 2,000 odd, and they're all different types of orthopedic surgeon. You have the neurosurgeons, you have the trauma surgeons who deal with the broken bones, you have the pediatric orthopedic surgeons dealing with children, you have the hip replacement for the elder people. They've all got their own little kind of divisions, and they were working together to say, well, actually, what is our common purpose? And their issue was that they were all operating in silos and pulling apart instead of actually collaborating and having one single shared voice. And when we went through a comprehensive exercise of understanding what they really stood for and what benefit they were providing to their end customers, which were the orthopedic patients in British Columbia, it was all down to one word: mobility, enabling them to be able to provide mobility, pain-free mobility that allowed people to live their full lives, get back to work. And each one of them actually had a vested interest in doing that. So when you could articulate a common shared purpose, which was to maximize the patient's mobility, very, very simple, very straightforward, it stood them apart from every physician in the land and gave them purpose within the region that they could all buy into. So that's just one example of how it's very powerful.
Right. Absolutely right there. So all in all, purpose is very, 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 very important. All right. So that brings me to my next question here. I've spoken to so many people who are into the art direction and into building brand identity. I've realized that often smaller brands or even bigger brands, they don't exactly know the difference between brand awareness and brand recognition. What, according to you, are some basic differences about brand awareness and brand recognition. This time, let me start with Peter.
Do you want to start with somebody else on
Sure,
this?
Sunny, maybe
I'm sorry.
Sunny, maybe you can take up, or Matt, you can
and
take
then-
up.
Yeah, and then I'll pick up second.
I'm happy to. Matt, you want me to take
No,
it, or
you
wanna
go.
take it?
You go.
Okay.
You go.
So I would say that brand awareness is about how much people know about a brand when its name is mentioned.
Right.
So let's take Oatly, for example. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the oat milk brand for the most part, but do you know its ethos, culture, values, beliefs, features, and other information? I would argue that that's brand awareness. So brand recognition is the ability to identify a brand from its visual and verbal cues, and maybe even its sound cues. So I think probably the most notorious example would be the shape of a glass Coke bottle. In the dark, if someone handed you a Coke bottle, you would know exactly what brand that was. The sound of a tweet. Both of those, I think, are extraordinary examples of that.
I think you're right. Absolutely there on point. Matt, please.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the recognition one's very interesting because, I do a thing often when I get into execution phases where you do the blind logo test. I'm sure everybody on the panel's done that, where you cover the logo up, right? Can you still identify, or could a customer still identify this piece of communication is from that brand? That's recognition, and I think that's so powerful if you can do it. Awareness, distinct, it is about that knowledge. It's like what Sonny says when you hear the name, what do you know about that brand? And the two are different, but they're also very closely linked, because what you need to do is obviously the aim of the game is to get both, right? So you're recognized and people are fully aware of what you do. And that's the challenge. But yeah, there is a distinct difference between the two.
Absolutely right. Peter, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to avoid what's a tricky question. I was just having horrible feedback here. I hope the listeners aren't getting the same echo I'm getting. I think the other two have done a better job at drawing a distinction than I do, because I don't actually see such a big distinction between awareness and recognition. I think you have to force it. It's recognition. I think what Sunny was saying is something you can pick up from triggers and cues. Awareness is basic saliency and whether you're absolutely familiar with it overall. But
they're very close.
Yeah, to be honest, yeah, they're close. To be honest, I would move on to another question for the listeners, something deeper.
Right. So the next question up is how important, let's talk about social media here. So what, according to you, how important are social media platforms for brand building? And are there any milestones to cross to leverage them? Let's start with Matt.
Well, I mean, anyone who says social media is not important, I think, would need their head checked. I mean, obviously, most people who have joined this particular, webcast will have become aware of it through social media. Everybody's on social media. Right. It's how we communicate in the modern world. And if branding is the management of meaning, then you need to manage the meaning that's going on in the virtual world just as much as you're managing it in the real world, if you like. So yeah, very, very important. I think if you're talking about building brands, though, it's the challenge I think brands have, and we have as individuals. If you're thinking about your personal brand, is how do you cut through the noise? Because on all these platforms, it's just tweet after tweet after tweet. It's message after message. How do you create something that is relevant and distinctive in the noise? And that's what brand strategy, which Sunny mentioned earlier, should begin to do, because it should help position you as to what you stand for and what you don't stand for, and what to link it back to the previous question, what your purpose is about, and what it's not about. And so that gives you two sides to a coin. One is the offensive, which is this is what we're championing, and one is the defensive, which is, and this is why the others are wrong, right? And you can play that story up or down as your industry requires or as your personal brand requires. But you should have, I call it the yin and the yang, right? The positive and the negative. You should have an idea in your mind as to what that is. And social media therefore becomes a great platform for you to signal to the world both of those things. What are you championing, and what are you fighting against, basically?
Absolutely right there. Peter, you want to add down points with Matt?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, obviously, social media is hugely important. It's probably over 50% of all impacts, and especially higher than that if you're in the younger generations. But I'm speaking as part of the older generation, and I would urge listeners to not be bedazzled by it either. To what Matt was saying, what's important is what your customers or your belongers take out of the messages that you're communicating, regardless of the medium. Every medium has its pros and cons. And as we kind of diversify into this multitude, a kaleidoscope of different mediums, even within social media, each have their own identities and characteristics. So, you find if you want to talk to the youth now, you probably be doing Snapchat or TikTok. The more and more that becomes popular with an older group, and I know what this stands for, the less and less appealing it becomes to a particular younger group who want to find their own niche that the older folks like me will never discover. So, but what you have, what the takeout of your communication is that matters, and in some ways, traditional media. Well, in many ways, traditional media still has enormous value relative to social media and digital media. So every medium in its own right communicates in a different way, whether it's print or poster or press, or whether it's the Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever. They've all got their own characteristics. You need to understand the dynamics of that, because the way in which your message is carried or conveyed will be interpreted differently. So, I mean, a message on LinkedIn can afford to be more business oriented. It can be more direct. It can be more commercial. A one on Facebook is probably more social, and would not accept it. So, yeah, the medium is the message. Has been said, it's a cliche. It's not. The message is the message, but the medium adds to the message in which it's carried in. If I have a comment from Dolphin or whatever it is from Peter, and it's issued in the Harvard Business Review, people are going to listen to it. They're going to read it. They're going to, whoa, okay, fantastic. If it comes from Peter's own little hand printed brochure that I'm handing out on the street corners, it's probably not going to carry so much weight.
Right, absolutely right there, Sunny.
Well, I think that was quite the quite the level of detail. I would say that it's about density and volume, but also focus, because I think a lot of people think that just throwing the net really wide means that everyone's going to hear that message. And I think when you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. And so I think for small businesses specifically, I think it's incredibly important to actually understand, to Peter's point, what the purpose of each one of those platforms are typically used for. And most importantly, where your people are, so that when you begin to speak, that you've got consistency, but you're also not trying to hit every single platform, because that may not be where you're going to get the most result. You need to kind of sort of figure out where those consistent points are and where you believe those channels can be for you, and then drive your focus into those. And then you can sort of branch out. But I think it's important to start building loyalty small and focused and dense, and then begin to sort of widen that as you begin to get more people paying attention to what you have to say.
Absolutely right. Then I think even for this, a brand needs to go back to a base, the purpose of the brand, to build a better social media, to leverage social media. Absolutely right there, on point there, everyone here. So, all right, I hope everyone is enjoying the session. And so before we move forward, I would like to give a quick shout out to Designhill, world's leading creative marketplace, for organizing this event. Stay tuned, everyone, and we will be right back to hear more from our panelists.
Clarematics is a full-service video agency based around video production. We created a brand that fit our identity at the time, but as we've evolved as a company, we found that that original brand didn't quite fit our aspirations anymore. Finding a partner to rebrand your entire company takes a lot of time and effort. Finding Designhill was an incredible lifeline. Designhill offers a money-back guarantee. If we don't like any of the designs, we get all of our money back. The stuff that we ended up with were well beyond what we had been seeing on other creative services platforms. After creating a simple design brief by answering some questions created by Designhill, we posted, and within a few days, we had over 250 entries. Designhill's platform made it easy to communicate with all of the potential designers. Eventually, we picked a winner. In addition to a logo, our designer also created a letterhead, business cards, and banners for all of our social media platforms. With Designhill's help, we now have a brand that meets our aspirations. We're ready for the future and everything that it's here to bring.
All right, everyone, we're back again. Guys, if you have any questions, please put them in the questions tab on your right. It'll be easier for me to pick up questions for our panelists here. So let's move ahead. My next question is, tell us some critical digital channels that fundamentally help any brand to gain awareness and growth. Anything on your mind? Any channels? Quick ones. Sunny?
Well, I think all of the, the biggest front door that you have, right, from a digital channel is going to be ultimately your website. If you are e-com, then obviously some type of storefront, but also if you think about all of the channels that you have access to, you have social marketing, you have content marketing, you have PR. There's a lot of ways to sort of broadcast that sermon out and get people to be excited about it. Obviously distills back to that purpose, but I think being incredibly focused and detailed on where ultimately that brand, your brand, is going to live and how people are going to interact with that. You want to be mindful of the channels that you're utilizing and make sure that ultimately you're sussing that out into the right channel so that people can find you easily, understand that service offering or product offering, and ultimately what they're going to buy from you. So and you're using different digital channels to ultimately amplify that purpose, that message, that belief, all of the brand assets, brand identity, brand voice, the whole 360, right? You're trying to make sure that you're using these different tools in your toolbox to essentially amplify that message largely. But I'm sure Matt and Peter have some thoughts on this too.
Right. Peter?
Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult one because the temptation nowadays seems to be to try and pile it high and spread it wide, and get out there with as much content as possible. And my feeling is that it may not be the most effective way, to be honest. I can see people just in the medium that I use a lot, LinkedIn, turning into kind of professional content generators, if you like, or hiring people to do their content generation just to be able to kind of keep the visibility up and keeping constant nets out there so people will flow into it. And I get that. But it kind of goes against the grain about treating each individual as an individual as well, and being able to speak to them personally. And my temptation is to narrow focus a little bit more and have fewer communications in fewer channels that suit you, but that really resonate with the people that you want to connect with and build deeper relationships. It's only one way. But my feeling is the social media angle is trying to push everyone into doing everything. And we've got so many different channels. I have 18 on my phone just to collect messages. It's really difficult, I'm finding at the moment.
Right, absolutely right there. Matt?
Yeah.
Matt, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Oh, that helps. Thank you. Yeah, no, just on this question. So I think it depends on your strategy, right? So it's a really difficult question to answer without, you know, a specific brand in mind. And one thing I think we've sort of skipped over a little bit is the audience, right? The brand should exist to serve a particular type of audience or tribe, if you like, a group of people that are bound together, that believe what you believe, which you can serve and add huge value to. Now, if you haven't defined them, you've got a problem. You go to what Peter says, and you kind of scattergun around the place to try and, you know, land the odd message in the right place. A far more effective way of thinking is to really start small, define your audience, define what, you know, how you're going to help them become something better, how you're going to help them overcome a problem and a challenge. And then from there, you work out, all right, where are these people? Where do they hang out online? Or where do they hang out physically? What do they need? And if that thing doesn't exist, you create it for them, and you become basically the brand for them. And that's the aim, really, to become the only brand that they would look to for your particular offering, because you know, you're famous in their minds, and you really add huge value that nobody else can add.
Yeah, absolutely. I think knowing your audience is also plays a major role here to build, to grow a brand. Absolutely right there, Matt. That actually gets me to my next question here. During building a brand, during elevating a brand does a lot of mistakes for sure. So how to generally avoid these mistakes, what type of mistakes, and how to avoid these mistakes while elevating a brand? Let's start with Sunny.
I think most of brands that we work with that get it wrong start outside in. And so they're starting with product, they're starting with a benefit, a feature, they're trying to sort of start the brand from outside in versus inside out. And Motto specifically really focuses on inside out branding, which I think is incredibly important for most current modern brands today, which is, ties back to obviously the purpose and what are we fighting for and what are we fighting against. But more importantly, anyone, not to say that anyone can do the same widget that you're doing, but there are a lot of things that happen within a company, within an organization, specifically at the leadership level, that actually begin to differentiate you. And a lot of times when brands are only resting on certain pieces of the brand that could be arguably replicated, I think that you start to play a very fast race to the bottom rather than starting to understand what internally makes you different, which is obviously those key differentiators that we talked about at the top of the hour, but things where you're trying to understand what truly within your point of view and within your own competitive set are the things that you want to bring more and give more to, whether that more weight, more energy, more time, more resources. You want to be able to start internally and then work your way out. And product is, I would say in startup culture specifically, you have a lot of that going on. Another sort of thing that I see a lot of brands get wrong is they operate on this hot sauce on the brain mentality, which is everything's a fire, everything's urgent, everything's now. And they burn a lot of time and cash and energy trying to fight those fires rather than be a little bit more strategic in what they're trying to do. And ultimately, how that then sort of trickles down into product, your offer, whether you're in the service-based business or you have, say, a product or a D2C brand, for example, understanding that those strap lines are really, really, really important because they're ultimately going to make your product more interesting and also more viable in the long run. So inside out is, I think, a goal, but most brands start outside in.
Yeah, you're right, actually. Matt, you want to add down?
So what was the question? Sorry.
So a brand makes, a lot of mistakes while elevating themselves in the market. So what, according to you, can be the basic mistakes which they generally do, and how to avoid them?
Yeah, no, it's I really liked what Sunny said actually about people starting outside. I think so I'm calling in from United Kingdom, and one of the things that we were famous for was to help the Industrial Revolution, right? And in the Industrial Revolution, the winner was basically the business that owned the biggest factory, right? So they would produce lots of stuff, which was great 150 years ago. But what that had led to, if you zoom out from that, was a lot of stuff that was then we ran around trying to sell to people. So we had, a factory that made bins, and we'd run around going, buy my bin. Do you want a bin? Do you want a bin? Do you want a bin? And as time went on, okay, it became a numbers game. The more people you approached that didn't have a bin, the more chances were that you would sell your bin. This is a really bad example, by the way, but walk with me through this, right? So that was the old model. In other words, you have a way of producing product, and then you run around and interrupting people and advertising the fact that they could buy that from you. And if you approach them, 99% of people wouldn't want it, but 1% would. So the more people you approach, the more the model was, the more you'd sell. But that's so old school, that kind of thinking. And funnily enough, it's still in businesses today. Like as Sonny alluded to, people produce a new product, they think it's great, and they're running around trying to sell it. And the way that they're doing that is by creating a lot of noise. But as I kind of pointed out, the aim is to cut through the noise. So how do we do that? And it goes back to what I sort of mentioned before. Instead of starting with the product, stop and think about the customer. So replace in your priority order, we can innovate this new product with who is our customer? What is their pain? What is their problems? What are they trying to overcome? Who are they trying to become? And work from there. Work with focus groups. Listen. I think that would be my number one tip. Listen to your audience, and from there, innovate and work with that audience in a collaborative way to actually create solutions that really solve the problem for them. So that would be my number one tip. Listen. A lot of brands don't do that. A lot of businesses have a number of kind of onion rings, onion skins, if you like, before they get to their audience. And the leadership team sits in this little cocoon in the middle. My recommendation is to bring the voice of the customer into the boardroom to create the brand, as Sonny put it, inside out.
Absolutely right there. Peter, you want to add down to Matt and Sunny here?
Yeah, that was a great point about, I call authentic audits, cutting through the crap and going straight to what people are really saying about your brand. Matt said it brilliantly, and Sonny before that. I had two slightly different takes on mistakes that people typically make. One is what I say, going too broad, trying to be too many things to too many people. I can see Matt's head and Sonny's heads nodding as I'm saying this, so thank goodness I haven't got that wrong. But it's such a common mistake. People think they're going to catch more if you go wider and wider, and it's just not true. It means you've only got a certain mesh in your net, and the more and more you stretch your net, the bigger the gap is, and the fish and everything can go through. You're not fishing in one area for one species of fish. So I say narrow focus, be more specific, own a small territory, and then champion that and defend it. I used to liken building brands to, trying to own Texas. If you try and own the whole of Texas and ring fence and protect it from invaders, you can spend your whole time building your fence. But if you choose one high hill and build a cast stone on it, you can defend it from all attackers and invaders, and you can build out from it. And so that's it. Don't go too broad. The other thing would be, don't lose the sharp edges of your brand. And in particular in this environment that we're in now of cancel culture, correct language, not offending anybody. We're all nice, polite people. We don't want to intentionally upset anybody. But brands tend to do the same as well. And in doing that, you take all the sharp edges off your brand. And a really strong brand actually alienates people who it doesn't want. Matt mentioned it earlier. If you've got a belief system, are you on a bus or you're not on a bus? But people are very afraid to say, no, this isn't for you. But unless you do that, you don't actually build strong affinity for the people who do belong to your brand. So we're so worried about offending people and cutting people out and excluding with all of this inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which, by the way, I'm very pro. Yes, I'm all for that. But when it comes to brands, don't be afraid of actually actively excluding. And as we used to do, you know, not for girls, Yorkie chocolate. Sorry, that's not a sexist thing in any way, but they used to have big chunky chocolate that was too big for most women to get their mouth into, and it was intentionally positioned that way, unashamedly. I don't know whether it could do.
Peter, you said something really interesting right there, but I think like one of the biggest things that that I would add to that is that people spend or one of the biggest mistakes that companies can make is actually throw a lot of money at a bad brand. And we see this over and over and over again, where if you have a small business and you are trying to just spend money to market that brand repeatedly, and that is not working, that tells me that you have a bad brand. And even at the corporate level, sometimes you will see brands will spend atrocious amounts of money trying to correct a brand flaw, a brand gap that is clear to everyone else in the room but them. And what they're doing is they're like, if we just throw more money at it, we just maybe we market it more, if we just like have more advertising, Google ads, whatever we got to do just to get it out there. And they never stop to think that maybe they're actually throwing money at a bad brand, and that brand is no longer serving or clear or even relevant to the audience that they're trying to talk to. And maybe the audience has changed, right? And the needs have changed. It's crazy to me how that happens, but the goal is to not do that, so that you can zoom back out and go back to the fundamentals of like, who are we? What are we fighting for? What are we fighting against? Who are we speaking to? Why should anyone care? You know, there's very sort of simple 4 to 5 questions can point you very quickly back to a source of center. And then the gravity around that is where you start to move your business, you know, rather than trying to retrofit a bad brand and more money, more, you know, eyeballs, when the brand is not meaningful in the first place.
Do you mind
Right
if I just
there.
come in here
Yes,
just
yes.
1 second? I just,
Yes.
I know we've got a few designers on the call, as in graphic designers and editors. I can see there's at least a couple on there. I'm sure there's a few more there. But I just wanted to say to the designers on the call that, look, you know, what you're hearing here from Sunny and Peter and what I've been alluding to, I think is our responsibility, I'm not a designer anymore, I'm an old designer, but it's a design question. Because if you're being asked to create more noise, it's not actually going to solve the problem that the brand has. And the problem the brand has is that it needs to cut through, it needs to be meaningful, it needs to really, you know, help people, right? And so I think it's up to you, if you're given a brief, to question that brief, to challenge that brief, and to say to the business leader, look, why are you actually in business? Who is our audience? Why should they care? And genuinely, why is this a good thing for the audience? Why is it different? And if they don't know, then you know you really need to kind of then help them with the strategic elements, or point them in direction of a strategist, because frankly they're just going to, as Sunny said, just throw good money after bad, and it's going to be a waste of everybody's time, and your work will suffer. That's my view. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. I know we're in Designhill and there'll be a lot of designers kind of coming on, but I think what you're hearing here is a call to action to all designers to really dig into briefs and question these ideas a little bit.
Yeah, and if I can build on that as well, because I'm seeing the same thing about the designers, and I used to work closely with designers for 25 years. I was on the writer side, copy side, writing side, so I truly appreciate an area which I do not have natural gifts in, but I do have the ability to recognize something that's brilliant when I see it, and that's what brilliant design does. It almost gives you that aha moment. It's so simple because it translates a great strategic proposition or a promise or a brand positioning in a visual language, and it brings it to life in such a much richer way. I mean, I process information visually, so it's frustrating when I can't do it myself, but I can totally appreciate it in brilliant design. And so, you know, the designers themselves, I mean, they will be applauding themselves, because I'm only telling you what you know already. Is a special gift if you can do it, and it adds so much value to your brand. It's an integral part of the whole proposition, and sometimes it's the whole brand. Honestly, sometimes it is absolutely the whole brand.
True. It is absolutely true. So you guys have already answered my next question. So my next question was actually on strategy. Strategy breeds better design, and brand strategies don't really materialize on their own. How a designer actually plays a very, very important role to create that brand identity, to create that whole experience. Because if a brand logo is only not appealing, a person, as a consumer, I would not go through that brand. So yes, designer plays an important role. So let's take up my next question here. Developing a brand identity is one area of marketing that's often overlooked. How do you think a brand can leverage brand building platforms like Designhill to build its branding strategies? Let me start with Matt.
Love that little shameless plug for Designhill there, but we are in the Designhill webinar, so fair play to you. Okay, so look, it's about communicating, it's about creating experiences that matter to your audience. So providing you have set out your strategy, you're listening to the voice of the customer, you're creating things of value, then I see no problem with using in fact, I encourage my clients to get communications out as effectively as possible, and if that's by using something like Designhill, great, go for it. So it's one of a number of things that you can do, but yeah, that's it really. Communicate well, communicate your message well, but get that message right to start with.
Absolutely right. Sunny, you want to add down to Matt?
Yeah, I think that platforms like this are helpful for specifically, scrappier brands who need to kind of get to market quickly and maybe do not have the resources or funding to be able to hire somebody like a Motto, perhaps, where we're dealing in a little bit more complex brand challenges at the operational level, which requires like deep competitive thinking, and you're going in and analyzing the culture, and you're just going very deep and wide. But to Matt's point, I think what a platform like this does really well is it allows companies to validate and test, while also, again, not disregarding those core fundamentals, but ultimately trying to find ways to sort of A/B test and prototype and get some things out there with those strong brand foundational points in place. Then something like this could absolutely work for a brand that's just trying to get some traction. And then usually, they'll, once they're kind of growing and scaling and they hit the place where they begin to sort of self-evaluate, our brand no longer suits where we're at, then they bring in a company like us, or even somebody like Matt, but I think it's important, and probably Peter too, where their challenges are much more wide and deep, than you're going to need something like that. But yeah, I think it's a great platform for things of that nature.
Thank you. Actually, right. Designhill is actually for base, to build the base, and then a brand can go to big shots like Matt, Sunny, and Peter here for their strategies and for their growth. Absolutely right there. So now I'm bounded with time here, and the time is passing by really, really fast here. So this would be my last question here on the panel. So repurposing and redesigning helps to ease the impact of the evolving times. What are the most critical changes that a brand must make in today's scenario to face the future effectively? Let me start with Peter.
Okay, that's a pretty easy question. I think the ability to balance consistency of what you're delivering with the ability to change where you need to. Obviously, that sounds like a bit of an everything answer, but it's true, because the strongest brands still continue to deliver against the expectations of the benefits that their core customer group expect of them. But they need to do it sometimes in very, very different ways. As we've all experienced with this global pandemic, we instantly jumped into a different medium. We're Zoom now, we're all in live interact, but it hasn't changed the content of what we're talking about, which is brand and design and brand building and strategy. It's just the medium has kind of changed, and the one which we communicate. So an agile response to a situation, but the content and the value, if you like, hasn't changed in terms of what we're doing. So yeah, matching consistency with agility and courage to change when you have.
Absolutely right there. Sunny?
I think Peter just said a beautiful line there about having the courage to be able to change and pivot. And I think a lot of companies are really scared of that. I think the pandemic forced many businesses into having to pivot and even embody a bit of whiplash, you know, of sometimes letting the tail wag the dog, so to speak. And I think what a lot of brands need to be able to do is to be agile, while also being rooted in a sense of like who they are, because the who you are should not continue to change. I think that's probably what I would encourage, you know, people that are working on these brands to be thinking about, or even owning these companies, you know, to think about is who you are shouldn't continue to keep changing and evolving and shifting based on what you think the market is doing, but rather where do you need to evolve, but also to be flexible, you know, but to have that a little bit of that rigor, but also to know that adaptability and flexibility, and also having the guts to change and evolve your business when you really need to, when the writing's on the wall. Sometimes before the writing's on the wall, it requires a great deal of self-awareness. So, you know, that would be my take on that.
Right. Matt?
So remind me of the question, because I found the question a little bit tricky. So we're giving, just remind me of it, and then I'll do what I can.
So the question is that repurposing and redesigning, you know, helps to ease the impact of the evolving times, you know. What are the most critical changes that a brand must make in today's time to face the future effectively?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. I mean, if we're talking execution, then we need guidelines, and we need you know, you need ways of aligning teams. But I think more important than that is what all of the things that we've been talking about. You need your North Stars in place. You need alignment at leadership level right the way down through an organization. You need your principles to be set. So going back to what the other, I love the way you called us big shot, by the way. My other big shot panelists just said. I think what we're talking about here is making sure that those are principles that we never, once they're sort of set, that they are in place, they're high enough, they're important enough. But then the way that you flex and you communicate them through your various channels, through various brand activation things, and how you execute, that can change depending on where the audience is. But the principle of why you exist, who you exist to serve, that doesn't change. So you need to have them defined. I would say that would be the number one thing I would propose and suggest that brands should be doing.
Absolutely right there. I think all in all, the key takeaways are, you know, you should always have a purpose, brand identity, brand awareness, and brand recognition. All of these things are like different. They have different meanings, especially brand awareness and brand recognition. One actually does the mistake, you know, during building a brand doesn't know the difference between these terms. Great. So, all right, this brings us to an end of this wonderful session with Peter, Matt, and Sunny. This was indeed a value-packed session, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. I am bounded with time here, and I will have to end this session, although I never wanted this to end here. I can go on, listen to you guys. All right, guys. So for the audience, this is not where it ends. We have more events lined up in the coming days. So if you guys are interested and haven't registered yet, my colleague Robin will be putting the links in the questions in the chat section there. On your right, you can check it out. To stay updated with all these events, you can follow us on our LinkedIn page. You can also give us suggestions on different topics you would want to cover, and we would be hosting those topics. To watch this session and other such wonderful sessions in the past, which we have already done, please don't forget to subscribe to our official YouTube channel. The links are in the chat section. For all the designer and artist community who are listening and wish to be a part of this thriving community, visit designhill.com. On that note, I would like to say a bye to everyone who joined us here today. Take care, guys, and stay safe. Bye.